Welcome, Jane, and so glad a few of you were able to join us live for our chat with Jane. So, most of you know and have read Jane Hadley's books, but for those who don't, Jane writes historical romance teeming with footnotes and feels. She lives under 7 layers of blankets where she can comfortably survey the cool tundra of Minnesota through wavy glass windows, which she refuses to replace because old things are inherently valuable. I do love that. Some original windows. She is the author of Mrs. Milner Gets a Kitchen, The Secret Soldier serial, and Oh, You Pretty Things. And as of today, Mr. Milner Gets a Divorce. Today is release day, so we're so excited to be able to celebrate that.
Woo! Yes, thank you so much. I didn't mean for that to happen, but then it did, and I'm so excited.
But we're
We're
so
thrilled to be
excited.
celebrating with you.
Yay.
So we invited Jane to talk to us a little bit about joy and historical romance, and specifically revolutionary HEAs, and how the power of historical romance to reimagine futures for us now and what we learned from the past. So we are so excited to be able to just learn more from Jane just around her writing and research process and also life today for you in Minnesota and everything that you've been through over the last year and kind of your journey. But we have to kind of start where it all began with Mrs. Milner Gets a Kitchen,
Oh.
because that's how we discovered you, and I'm sure that's how many of folk have discovered you. And we just have to know how that premise came to be, how you came up with that. What was the story? Was that the first thing you truly wrote and decided to bring to readers? I just need to know the lore behind Mrs. Milner.
Sure. Well, if you have Mrs. Milner Gets a Kitchen and you look at the dedication, it's dedicated to the ghost that haunts my kitchen. Because I live in a 1915 craftsman house, but it came with a 1959 GE appliance suite. And so the entire premise of this story is sort of me melding some knowledge that I have from my grandparents in with like the story of how my kitchen came to be in this old house. I just decided this was what it was, and I made up that story, and it made me laugh. And that is usually how most of my premises start. I'm like, let's come up with a weird pitch that like makes me laugh or like I find interesting, and then I'll write it out. And then eventually the therapy of writing will like unearth all of my divorce trauma from childhood and all sorts of other things.
There's always
Voila, a
something
book has
to
been born.
cover.
So
That's
that's
great. So
how,
do you
yeah.
have a teal kitchen? Is that the true GE appliance set that you have?
Well, I do now. So the GE appliance set was chocolate brown,
Beautiful.
because the trend was for the appliances to match all the cabinets and everything to be uniform. And this family had wooden cabinets. I did a bunch of research on the house. The husband was a cabinet maker, and so he had all of the custom cabinets are all around, and the countertops are very short. They're We had to buy a dishwasher that's like ADA compliant to fit underneath them because they're so short. Um, so I came up with lore about that too. These are
What do
short
you think?
cabinets.
What do you think this couple got up to while those
Uh,
cabinets were being crafted?
I don't know, but I feel from the light seances that me and my sister have conducted that she approves of the whole situation. I think she's quite happy. Although we did have to replace the appliances, and when we did, we got replica ones that are teal
Oh,
because
nice.
chocolate brown was a choice. Mm.
Yeah,
Times
total
have
vibe.
changed.
Yeah.
So I love that you jumped into the story, obviously with some personal connections. What draws you to, and now you're circling back with Mr. Milner Gets a Divorce. What specifically about that mid-century setting is interesting to you? Because your books have been set across a variety of time periods, as early as
Yeah.
the Civil War and as late as the 1970s. So I'm curious, when you write in the 1950s, what that feels like and what draws you to it.
I think I like to feel a connection with people in the past and use historical fiction to imagine what their lives might have been like. And that feels like an appropriate way to connect with them because I think in the study of academic history, you really want to make sure you're really not imagining like you're everything that you're claiming is supported by evidence, and that's kind of where I work in my day job. So I really wanted a place where I could express all of the emotions and the longing and my relentless desire to think about people kissing, in a place where it felt like appropriate to do so. So I think the 1950s in particular, I think I feel connected to my grandma in that way. She's 90, she's turned 97 yesterday.
Oh,
And we're going to her birthday party this weekend. It's going to be super fun. But I did an oral history with her and my grandfather before he passed, and it was really interesting to think about how life was really different, but how it was also really similar. You know, so like I remember asking them, "How did you decide to have five children?" And they just looked at me and laughed. You know, that was not a decision. But other things were really similar. And I think that, I see a lot of connections between the things that we struggle with in our present and the things that people have struggled with in the past. And I find that to be really interesting. Also, everybody looks good in a 1950s dress. It is a shape that works for everyone.
it's so flattering. I agree. I do miss that look.
I mean, we should just bring it back. It's a really flattering look. And the 1860s also have that same shape, so
Yeah.
maybe that's why.
Yeah. Maybe that's what has specifically chosen your time period.
Yeah. I'm just
Yeah.
like, what outfits will I look good in?
I
Hmm.
do tend to associate that silhouette with a Disney adult living where I do.
Oh, I suppose.
Yeah, I didn't think
It's
about that.
it's a real thing. But for good reason. Like it's a great silhouette. It's just also a great opportunity for companies to like manufacture, cheap fabric editions of that silhouette, I guess.
That's so funny.
Anyway, that's not about you.
Well,
If
I'm
you
curious.
do, if you're gonna go that direction, I'm gonna get into a long side chat about synthetic and non-synthetic fabrics. So
Okay,
let's
we're actually really here for the side of you that is dressing historically accurately.
Yeah.
uh I do okay, so I do 1860s reenactment um because I don't know. I just thought it would be fun.
Yeah,
Um
sounds really fun.
so it is really fun, and I learned all about split crotch drawers.
Hell yeah, you
And I feel like the historical romance community needs to gather around split crotch drawers because we are missing out on some really epic opportunities here.
why wear underwear at all? That's my question.
I mean, in the early part of the 19th century, why wear underwear at all? Honestly, like
Yeah.
because they didn't is the thing. Um, and that's something I'll need to write about at some point. But
I love it.
I mean, split crotch drawers are ridiculous and very convenient. Um, and I think that wearing historical clothes is just, it's another way that I'm like, oh, I feel like I can get into the head of people in the past and get into kind of think about their culture in a different way. Because, culture happens across place, but it also happens across time.
Mhm.
And so I think historical dress can help you get into the mindset of like, oh, well, how would you move in this type of garment? And what do we think about people who wore these garments and what actually is true about people who wore these garments, right? Like corsetry comes to mind a lot for me because we often, hear about actresses in films that are, wearing corsets and they're like, they're so horrible and uncomfortable. And that just seems and they're like, all these women were so oppressed. And I'm like, it's a bra. People
Yeah.
didn't tight lace them like they do in Hollywood because they're not in a movie and they're not in a toxic body environment.
Yeah.
Like that tells us more about Hollywood today than it tells us about women in the past.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting to me too, because I feel like as historical romance readers, that is so much of how we're reading, because we're not only reading, what time period has this author specifically chosen to set their story in, but what time period is the author writing in that's informing the perspective they have on this specific time period, which so much of, like as we talk about like old school historical romance, it's like there's just a whole lot of 90s politics there. It's
Yeah.
not
Oh
like
yeah.
that's not the Regency. That's
I feel
just
like
like
this is
the
something
Bush
that
era.
Tori told us and when we did our lecture with Tori, but I always think about it ever since we had that conversation with her. It's like you have to consider when the book takes place, when the author wrote the book, and when you are reading the book. And those
Yeah.
three time periods have to engage with one another. It's like It's really yeah, I mean, it feels relevant today 'cause we published the Catherine Grant authored essay for the zine today, and she's talking about rereading a book and then seeing certain things through another lens. And it's like it really does have to do with when you come into the equation as the reader.
Yeah.
Yeah, that relationship helps you understand, kind of learn about values more. I honestly feel like it tells you more about when it was written than it does about the time period that it's set and the
Yeah.
values that the author had when they were writing it. And then that interacts with your values and you're thinking about that. And so I think historical romance as a fiction genre, as we're writing it and reading it in the present, we're having a conversation not about our past as much as we're having an analogous conversation about our present, through a kind of looking at the ways that people are struggling against different um, challenges that are set in the past but are maybe important to us because they have some sort of resonance in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, to go back to corsets for a second, I wonder if future generations will have the same initial feelings about corsets that, like millennials and Gen X people do, because we didn't have, like TikTok creators who were doing historical dress and then talking about it at length and showing us how the garments were made and demonstrating for us their practicality. And
Mhm.
if we had because like now, like as a millennial, I remember how I felt about corsets when I first learned of their existence and what I thought about them for a long time. And then that is very different from how I feel about them today.
Yeah.
They'll have
Yeah,
to.
right, right. Yeah, and that's like the beauty of historical study is you learn so much about the more you learn, the more you learn not just about people in the past and how they lived, but you gain greater insights and more empathy, I think, into the different choices that people make
Mhm.
in our own time too, and you learn more about yourself um, in your own time as well.
Yeah, I mean, to your point on like processing divorce trauma, I think about that with Mrs. Milner because it is so culturally relevant, whether, obviously she's facing such specific trials for kind of like cultural expectations of motherhood and being a wife and, being a homemaker, at a time when that was like capital H. But also everything that she's managing, especially right now, feels so salient as we have, similar regressions and just sex equity and things like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
when you say that, I'm like realizing, oh, I chose this time period because I had some stuff to say about womanhood and motherhood,
yeah,
very particularly, and relationships between women. Um, yeah, I had just had my second child, and I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about, and I had just moved in with my mother, and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that that was coming out, and it did. You're welcome.
that's so interesting because it's so true. And I think that, as a reader, that as we think about this kind of like triangular relationship, I think the reader is also bringing so many, we're bringing so many of our own relationships to bear and our own kind of understanding of our own kind of cultural expectations. And so it can really resonate, I think for readers who can feel acutely that sense of loneliness, the sense of judgment. Um, yeah, I mean, it makes her story so compelling. And you have very intentionally, and obviously I have not yet read Mr. Milner, but you have chosen characters who just don't fit in, for a variety of reasons, whether it's gender or societal expectations, whether, I think of your Secret Soldier duology and, the female main character is just too abolitionist for any of the abolitionists of the era. She is so like passionate about her causes and so willing to live her truth. And, that makes it hard for people to know how to interact with her. And so I just think you've done such a nice job picking these characters. And I'm curious, what comes to you first, if it's the character, the setting, like how you're kind of
Yeah.
piecing together, like why this story.
Usually for me, it starts with setting, and it'll be sparked by um, some sort of historical fact that I've learned. For example, last summer I learned that a bunch of French voyageurs did not wear pants, but in fact dressed in an indigenous way, where they wore leggings and long shirts. I learned this because I went to a reenactment and there was a bunch of old guys dressed this way, and I was like, "Why is your butt out?" And then I was like, "Oh, this is fun. Oh, this writes itself. I have to write this." Right? It's usually kind of a dumb idea, and then once I start writing it, things I don't know, like anybody in the room who writes, like you know that once you start to get into it, things come up and you're like, where did that come from?
Mhm.
Oh, I don't know. Is this public therapy? Uh-oh.
I mean,
But so usually it starts with setting, and then after I kind of like choose a setting and kind of choose um sort of some sort of conflict. Usually there's some sort of conflict that I usually have a pitch before I have anything else. And
Yeah.
then I will come up with figure out what the characters will be by doing just an enormous amount of historical research. Um, and Mr. Milner Gets a Kitchen, or no, he didn't get a kitchen, he got a divorce. Mr.
Yeah.
Milner Gets Divorced is almost entirely inspired by a memoir by Ricardo J. Brown, who lived in St. Paul, and he enlisted in World War II, and then like willingly outed himself and was dishonorably discharged from the military and went back to St. Paul. And it's all about his queer community in St. Paul, and is just a treasure source. Like so many communities have nothing like this because, like people didn't write it down, but he wrote it down and he wrote about all of these people. And it's very sort of like it's joyful and it's very funny. It's also kind of cynical and like he existed in a time he knew he wasn't supposed to exist in, and that's very resonant. And I got so much inspiration out of reading that book. It's just a slim little volume. If and I wrote in my author notes, I'm like, if you do anything, if you got anything out of this book, I hope you just read this one memoir. Please do, because it's so, so good. He's such a good writer, and the characters are so funny. Um, and I just wanted to, I don't know, write him a happy ending, I guess.
Yeah. And did you know that when you wrote Mrs. Milner Gets a Kitchen, did you know that you would circle back to Mr. Milner's story, or was that really like a more recent inspiration after that memoir?
No, but I have hobbies, and sometimes they thrive, and sometimes they flare out really quickly. So when I wrote Mrs. Milner, I didn't really have any mind to write another one. I just thought, oh, this will be kind of a fun way to get people to kind of see what I can do. And I thought, I'll write a short story. And then it turned into a novella. Then it was like, is it even a novella? I can't finish books. I don't know.
We're
So,
not complaining. Yeah, I love it.
so
Well,
it's interesting to know that Mr. Milner wasn't planned for necessarily because, you do sort of like drop little Easter egg in Mrs. Milner that he and his partner exist
yeah.
and that she's happy for them. And there's like I don't know, I guess like just today the book arrives and I'm thinking about how if the first book was Mr. Milner Gets a Divorce, that would be such a bummer because we'd be thinking about Mrs. Milner, but because it's flipped, it's like very satisfying.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It would be a big bummer. Somebody asked me today, like, should I read Mrs. Milner first? I was like, yes, yes, you should. You should. Or else you will be sad. Um,
Need to know she's being put into the mattress nightly
yes,
before you read about her divorce.
yes. But I knew who Joe was, and I didn't really know who Stephen was. But then, but I like that was, I knew that in my head. I knew that was the reason why. I needed to know what the reason was, um, to know Marion, I think,
Mhm.
and to be able to write her. But I didn't have a plan to write it until I read The Evening Crowd at Kermsers. And then I was like, Stephen, I found you. You're here. I need to write you immediately.
That's incredible. And again, just ties back to how diligently you've written Midwestern stories in particular. I mean, just knowing how localized that particular memoir is for you and for your life, and drawing from your own family histories. And so I know you jumped ahead, obviously, in Oh, You Pretty Things into the 60s, 70s. but still very Midwestern, which as a Midwesterner is so fun because we don't get a
Yeah.
we're not like a sexy location for books. We don't get a
We
lot.
are though. We're full of sex.
We
Apparently,
are full of
people have been
sex.
having sex here for generations.
I mean,
That's
that's
what
why
I've
we're
heard.
all existing.
Ta-da! Turns out. Um, yeah, and I think I was a history teacher and I taught US history for a long time and then I switched to Minnesota history and I just found it so resonant to be able to think about not just things that happened far away or with like important people, but just every local everyday people in your community, and kind of sifting through the layers of stories that are sort of baked into the landscape that you live in, right? And I think that like that's my commitment as a writer. Like I'm going to write stories as long as I'm writing historical romance or probably any type of, I don't know, it's going to happen in a place where I know because I live here and this is a place that's really important to me. And I've visited other places, and there are other places in my books that are visited, but everything is grounded in Minnesota because that's where I live and that's the landscape that I know. And I'm sort of obsessed with the details and want to make sure that things feel really real. And so, in order to do that, I feel like I need to write about places I know.
Yeah. Well, and it felt particularly resonant, not only, as we think about like across time and across place, you have the Midwestern grounding of, oh, you pretty things and some of those cultural touch points, but also, just I think the time we are living in right now is calling back a lot to that era in particular. And I know you recently read After Hours at Dooryard Books by Cat Sebastian. Not Midwestern set, but still similar kind of political atmosphere and some similar
Mhm.
themes. So I'm curious, how you think about that in light of what we're facing today, specifically in the United States and obviously you in Minneapolis.
Yeah. So I read After Hours at Dooryard Books in January when Operation Metro Surge was happening here. And so you know, I live in St. Paul, not Minneapolis, so I wasn't super local to either of the murders that happened there. But these are spaces that we live in and we've been through really intense times and we've been through as a community like multiple occasions of state violence in the past 6 years. Um, and it's it's something like this was not on my bingo card. Like never would have expected. And I thought, I'd always kind of thought I went to college in New York, and when I went there, people did not know where Minnesota was. Like they just like they were like, is that the Montana? No, Missouri. Oh, Mississippi. Not at all the same.
Yeah.
Michigan, I would have given you, but no, you didn't even. No. So like,
I would
I
have.
really felt like I was living in this place that was, very unremarkable. And, as an adult seeing these things happen in our state, there's a reason that happens in our state, but there's also a reason why Minnesotans react the way that we do and the way that we organized and the way that we banded together. There's roots of that in our history. And there's a reason why we knew how to organize this time. But I just needed something, I needed to read something that recognized or saw the the feelings that I was having because we're doing like this rapid response stuff where we're patrolling schools, we're all in these signal chats and like like I'm at work and somebody sends me a message and is like there's this place in St. Paul that needs somebody, can you like send the message, right? Because they're doing a raid on this restaurant or what have you. So it's just like it would come at any moment, um at any time, and I just needed to read something that saw that and could soothe that. And I think that After Hours at Dooryard Books was very specifically what I needed to read at that moment because it didn't numb, it wasn't distracting, it wasn't far away, it wasn't cozy. But it was cozy, right? But the characters in that book were struggling with a similarly volatile time. And they were having these like tired, burnt out feelings about resistance. They were having these really paranoid feelings. I remember reading somebody who had like done an early review of the book before January, and they were like, I just felt like this character's paranoia was a little unrealistic. And I was like, no, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, very reasonable.
I was like, oh yeah, I understand. This makes sense to me. I needed to read about people who were feeling things that I felt, and then read about them finding safety and community, and finding and using joy as fuel, right? Because joy is not like like healing injustice is not a prerequisite for joy, right? Joy is the fuel that helps us keep fighting against injustice. And I think, like, if you've seen the Singing Resistance group that came out of Minneapolis, like, they're just a perfect example of this because their songs are so joyful. They find so much community and connection when they sing together. And their messages are really, like, radically inclusive and kind, which I really love.
Well, it really like makes me think back to, our icon and queen, Miss Beverly Jenkins,
Yes.
because she has, through her whole career picked, you know, very, not necessarily all fraught eras. She's always in periods of transition, no matter where she's writing. But even in her kind of reconstruction set romances, very much to your point of like healing injustice as a, when she's writing, about Black Americans during these time periods, they won't have justice in the timeline of the story, but they will have love and they will have community and they will have, you know, meaning and purpose and fulfillment. And it's always meant so much to see authors, picking, time periods that are difficult. I think, again, when we think linearly that like progressive is linear and like, oh, those were bad times and this is a better time. And so why would they ever choose to set something then? But to your point, these are really cyclical and our communities have really deep felt memories of these experiences. And so it's more relevant today than we would think.
Yeah, sometimes the things that are the most painful to look back on are wounds that haven't healed, right? And that's why we need to maybe like face them. We need to face them. I find the Civil War to be one of those times. And here in Minnesota, the U.S. Dakota War is also one that we really need to face, and it is very difficult to talk about because it is so very obviously not healed. And, Dakota people still live in exile in other states because of that war. And they still don't have treaty rights because of that war. So there's a lot, like, if it hurts, it feels like it hurts to go back to it. It probably needs to be tended, right?
What
Um,
drew you then? I'm thinking of Oh You Pretty Things, thinking of that kind of similarly set, like what drew you to that setting and what about that specific moment in time?
so, little known fact, in 1969, before the Stonewall riot happened in New York, a couple of really weird kids got together at the University of Minnesota campus and they taught a class about sexuality, like a teach-in class at a cafe. And they formed a student organization called FREE, which stood for Fight Repression of Erotic Expression. Um, so it was founded by two students, and one of them was this young woman who had gone through shock treatment because of her lesbianism. Her parents decided to treat her lesbianism with shock treatment. And so she and her friend founded this group. And it's just it's like the messiest, most volatile group. They have like some like gay proms, and they have, like dances and other things so that people can meet each other. And um, there were one of the presidents of the group is Jack Baker, who sued to marry his partner Michael in the 1970s. Um, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and then they were like, nah, right? But it's one of the first marriage equality cases in U.S. history, right? So like it happened here. Like it wasn't just in San Francisco and New York City, right? There were queer people in the Midwest who were willing to stand up and say, this is not fair, the way that we are being treated. And we have been here for generations and we're really pissed off about it. And I really wanted to think about them. I grew up in a lot of queer spaces. I went to an arts high school and it was well, just, it was like, I don't know. It was gay school. Gay school for the gays. We had a
I
great
love
time.
it.
Um, and you know, depend and like I identify as queer, but I'm completely straight passing, so I don't really feel like this is my space, but it is I don't know. But the point is, my friends who couldn't blend in, I watched them at like the public high school that I went to. I watched how they suffered and how they were treated. And then I went to arts high school and saw how it could be. Like, what could a safe queer community look like? And it was beautiful and I loved it and I never wanted to leave. And I think that's what was feeding that story. Oh, you pretty things. That's what was feeding that story was what would happen for a young person who was really feeling complicated feelings about their sexuality and their gender. And, you know, what would that look like if they found a group of people who were just like, cool. And and then the mess. You have to have the mess.
Oh, it's so messy. It's so authentically a bunch of people in their early 20s. I remember reading it and was like, oh, dang it. This is like very relatably messy, for any of us who've lived through our early freaking 20s. I
I feel
commend
that
you. You write some mess.
yeah, young adult fiction needs to recognize how dumb young people are. Like arrogantly dumb. Like I remember being really, really certain I knew everything before I went to college. And then like my parents were so stupid. But then when I got back, I was like, oh wow, you got smart. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, and
You know?
you also have not shied away from writing some difficult characters. And I, again, like admire this. And thinking of Oh, You Pretty Things, and her name is currently escaping me, but our female character in our band,
Eve.
Eve, thank you. Oh, how could I forget Eve? Because that is so apropos in naming. But like, I'm just so curious I mean, you've really leaned in on like, I'm gonna write somebody that like,
I
even I'm gonna,
really I needed to confront my internalized misogyny and you all needed to
yeah,
come along for the ride.
yeah. I mean, I just like, again, very much respect the decision to say, like, I'm not gonna like soften her edges. I'm not gonna make her more palatable. She's going to make you uncomfortable with your judgments, like your internalized assumptions about her. So cheers for it, because it certainly takes the reader on a journey of like questioning how you perceive her and how you can see her in that dynamic.
She's haunting me right now. She's like, when am I getting a book? And I'm like, girl,
Oh,
just can we have a break? And she's like, no.
You heard it here first, are you
that
students?
feels so precious. Well, and I'm also thinking, again, like going back to even your secret soldier duology, you have, in the midst of writing very character-driven stories, I think in a lot of ways, have also, I mean, your passion for historical research is very clear,
So
as, there's just no bathing in the secret soldier duology. And I remember getting like 30% in, like, man, she's not going to give us any breaks. There's not going to be any, like, you're not going to fudge it at all for us. And
I was really trying to take care of you all in the second book because I was trying. I was like, there's gonna be this penultimate scene, and then I was like, let's do a standing bath. 'Cause I know people will appreciate that.
people do appreciate some bathing for our secret soldier.
Just a little standing bath. Like, why do you need to wash your hair right now, Kate? I don't know. No reason.
So funny. How was that? I mean, you said that you've been doing historical reenactment in that time period, but what about that specific time period and your inspiration for that story has stuck with you? And also, I want to highlight, because I know this is very close to Emily's heart, the fact that you chose to do a serial for that
Oh,
story and to serialize that story is so cool. And so just want to learn a little bit more about what your inspiration was for that.
Yeah, I had read a couple of books about women who had dressed as men to be Civil War soldiers, and some of them were people who, presented as a man in all walks of life, and then they were like, oh, well, I'm a man, I'm gonna go enlist in the soldier to be a soldier, right? And others were women who were like, I am going to dress as a man, and then I'm going to enlist. A lot of the examples in Minnesota are women. Is complicated because the U.S. Dakota War happens at the same time as the Civil War in Minnesota, and so a lot of um, the documented cases of women who dressed as soldiers in Minnesota did it because they wanted to fight in the U.S. Dakota War and
Mm.
protect, because there was a big, like, it, this is a common white supremacist theme of like the threat to white women
Yep.
as a reason to fight and to take down or like commit acts of genocide against groups of people of color. Um, they use that as a justification. So that's a theme. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out which regiment I was going to deal with, like what I was going to write about. And I chose the second regiment because I knew they weren't involved in the US Dakota War, because I'm not ready to bite that off. And I don't know that it's even my place to do so. Um,
Well,
Given it's not my story. I don't know.
I don't
I know
know. I feel
enough
like
to know that
as a
I'm like,
Minnesotan, you may have some skin in the game that there may not be too many other writers who can do that.
yeah. I feel like I would need to partner with an Indigenous writer to do
Yeah.
something, to do it justice. And I'm not there yet. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm like, oh my God.
It's obviously lurking on a back burner in your brain.
I
I
Got
can't
so many
wait for
haunting
the
stories.
next time we chat with you and we're like, oh, that book.
like, oh, I'm so sorry. Um, so what I was really excited and interested to do in writing The Secret Soldier, was try to figure out how women did it. Like practically day to day, I can document the Second Regiment day to day. Like there are diaries, there are letters. I can figure out where they were. I know exactly where they were when. I know what the weather was like. Like I know a lot. I can know a lot. And so I thought, well, how do I create a character and sort of walk her through her days? And I'm like keeping a period calendar, and I'm like trying to figure out where are the bathrooms. And I'm at the historic Fort Snelling site being like, interpreters, where are the bathrooms? And they were like, they were on scaffolds over the cliff. I'm like, shit, you can't make this stuff up.
Oh my,
What?
it's amazing.
Oh, so that I just, there was so much information, and the more that I researched, the more everything just took shape. I was like, New Ulm was founded by gymnasts? What? Why? How? Oh my God. What?
The gymnast part is really fun.
The like
Why?
Cincinnati German lore of it all was really fun for me. I was like having a really good time.
I went to Cincinnati last year for the first time, and I was like, tell me more about the Germans.
It's so funny. You can grow up right. I'm like 45 minutes north of Cincinnati and spent a good bit of time down in Cincinnati and did not know the history of gymnastics.
It's
It's amazing.
ridiculous.
I mean, you can't miss the German influence in Cincinnati, so I at least knew that, but I did not
Yeah.
know the history of gymnastics. Yeah.
Yes, you need to look up the 1855 Know Nothing riots because they're ridiculous.
I mean,
They're like
you're
wheeling cannons across town, trying to attack the German neighborhood, and the Germans are not having it. It's great. It's
They're
great.
just
oh,
back bending out of the way.
Yeah, they're just doing
Cannon
flips.
fire.
I don't know. It just made me laugh a lot, and I was like, can't make this stuff up, putting it in there.
yeah.
Can document this. Haha, it's real. So, yeah, and I serialized it because I was afraid it was too long, because it was too long. That was my first book, was A
Yeah.
Fine Looking Soldier, and eventually I just had to be like, um, it's two books. It ends here, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
That's
so I
really,
thought if I serialized it, like
yeah.
19 mid 19th century serials really read weird
Mhm.
when they're not serialized. Like, I did like with reenactor friends, we read The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins in
Oh,
its
sure.
original serialized format. And that book is really weird
I,
if you put it all together and you're like, why is it these perspectives? Like, it's first person, it's third person, it's all over the place.
I have it sitting on my nightstand. I've been determined to read Wilkie Collins ever since Lydia, my fave, of the Lady Sherlock
Like
series,
Sherlock,
was
yeah.
reading Wilkie Collins, and I was like, I gotta do it. So that's so interesting to know because I've
Oh,
not picked it up yet.
it's so weird. And
Oh,
it's too long.
that's so funny. Well, I mean, I'm also self-punishment reading like the unabridged Count of Monte Cristo, famously serialized,
That
is
is
absurdly
self-punishment.
excessively long with so many side quests and so many. So at least, I mean, your page count's got to be under Dumas. I mean, you've
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
yeah.
I did not write them to be serialized. I just wrote a book that was too long. And
So
then I thought, oh, you know what would be fun? What if we made it a serial and then I could draw these little cute illustrations and we'll put recipes in it. It'll be
that, I mean, what you did is so brilliant. Like sometimes when you're reading a book that was originally published as a serial, it's like, why are there so many chapters and they all end with a cliffhanger? And there's a lot of there's a lot of side quests that like if this was just a manuscript that had been submitted to a publisher, the publisher would have said, get rid of several thousand words. Like we don't need
These five
half of
characters can
this, you know?
go like, yeah.
Um, but then of course my big serial story that I always tell is that I listened to the audiobook of Elizabeth Gaskell's Wives and Daughters, which was originally published as a serial, and I got almost to the very end of the story and then it stops and a man's voice comes on and reveals that Elizabeth Gaskell died before she finished the story. But
what?
but
Which was
here's what
brand new
we can
information for Emily.
suppose would have happened. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, it was like 30 plus hours of audio. I was having the time of my life, and things were finally happening for the main character in the story. Elizabeth Gaskell dies.
I
Oh.
remember you messaged me before, like in between the two books, and you were like, "Don't die, okay? Don't die like Elizabeth Gaskell." I'm like, I
I'm,
don't plan
that
to.
there's real trauma there.
Oh my God. I still remember it's like if you're reading historical fiction of any kind, or at the time contemporary fiction, but historical for us now, without enough historical detail, everything can feel like a thriller. It's like
Yeah.
I have no idea where it's going to end because I just went into this with a hope and a dream. I didn't know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't translate to a different culture, right? So there's like cultural references that you don't understand because you don't understand that, oh, uh, a watch was you only have like a watch. It's not like on your wrist, it's a pocket watch and you're swinging it and people use it to entertain babies, but you wouldn't know that because we don't do that anymore. And it makes me wonder how much of our satire in our present is going to be taken as fact in the future. Oh, everybody thought this was true. Like Colbert, just on his own, is
Oh, it's so
historians are
interesting.
not going to know what to make of him.
It's really
It's
interesting.
yeah, it is. Yeah, because we do have so many like it like understanding well, and now I'm like thinking because I'm reading Ursula K. Le Guin right now, and she's just famous for doing the like I'm gonna throw you into an alien planet where all of the cultural norms are inverted, and what we think of as humorous is not humorous for them. What we think of as polite is not, like where all those little niceties and like cultural, and it's such an interesting thought experiment. And so yes, it makes you realize how much of like I still remember when my dad saw Zach Galifianakis Between Two Ferns for the first time when he interviewed President Obama, and he was so upset about it. I mean, like,
Yeah, because they're so
sorry, Dad, if you're
irreverent.
listening, like ratting you out for not getting the satire of it, but like he was so upset, and I just had a moment of like, oh, I need to explain the like comedy of this that like
Yeah,
like he signed up for this. Like he's acting too. Like everyone's acting. Like
yeah,
he's in on the joke, I promise.
it's so funny. I think I think that we have in our present this kind of sense we've been taught that oh we're a country of progress and we're more progressed than we've ever been, but I think it's increasingly obvious that that's made up and not true. And I think that I think a lot about Bridgerton season 5 announcement with Francesca and Michaela, and people were like, "That's not historically accurate. Lesbians didn't exist back then." And I'm like,
Of course
"Oh
not.
no, they don't know. They don't know. Somebody tell them."
Somebody tell
They
them,
don't know.
spoil this for them.
And it's so funny to me because that show is not historically accurate at all, and we know that.
Yeah.
But it's just it's like we're willing to be like, oh, this is fun, like an alternate reality where, race or ability doesn't matter. We buy into that. Great, cool, Shondaland, take us
Yeah,
there.
like they're turning around on the dance floor to Charlie XCX and we're just like
Yeah.
Yeah, we're bopping, we're having a great time. And, we're kind of sitting there thinking like, would I look good with a short stays like bust? I think I would. I think I need to make one of those.
Yep.
Or is that just me? Okay. Um, and but like there are certain things that are not that are like, oh, well, women are obviously much less, they have no rights and they have to marry and they have no access to money and are, oppressed and subjugated. And we're all like, oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It was like that back then. I'm like, back when? Back
yeah.
when we were dancing to Charlie XCX? Like, what?
Yeah. Well,
This was a choice. This was a choice about the world they were creating and the ways that it diverged from our reality and the ways that it converged, the things that we could play with and push against and that felt safe to push against and the things that didn't feel safe. And the fact that there were so many people who were upset that lesbians might be the main plot of a hit romance show, um, just it shows what people are tolerant of and what they're not tolerant of.
I mean, that's the thing. The dog whistle of historical accuracy, which I think we in
Yes.
the historical romance community have to like confront head on because it
Mhm.
is not just queer stories. I mean, God forgive, like, yeah, the number of times that is used as code for like, I would like to be able to use slurs on page or do,
Yep.
in our space a lot. That's like, it's not historically accurate for racialized people to have HEAs. Like the things that authors like Adriana Herrera and others have had to go up against in writing
Mhm.
their characters is unreal to me. And
Yeah.
so I think that it is a conversation we have to keep having in these spaces because we've got some bad actors in the reader space who
Yeah.
are just projecting again their own your time period. You're telling us what you feel right now. This has nothing to do with historical accuracy. You want your escapism to be devoid of people who are not like you. Like it's
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that historical romance has such potential to be like soothing to our present realities because it is so analogous. It's so like right next to our real experiences, but not quite,
Mhm.
that I think it has a real potential to soothe us in a way. And I think that looking at romance as escape from reality is fine. And I have no problems with that. But my experience in January with Dooryard Books, I was like, oh, but this can be a balm. Like it doesn't have to numb me. It
Mhm.
can soothe me if, like all of the like if we can stack the variables up in a certain way, Like I'm hopeful that there are people who read Mrs. Milner Gets a Kitchen and can feel soothed because it's analogous to something that, like, if they're experiencing a divorce or they're experiencing, pressure to be a certain kind of mom, or are having problems with family members. I'm hoping that those echoes can be soothing to them because they were soothing for me, right? Um, and so I want to write about real things, but I also want to have a good time. And I think we can do both. Like we can have, oh, how did I put this? I wrote it in the essay and it was so good. What did I say?
So eloquent, and you'll all get to read it very soon.
I wrote, joy isn't the reward for overthrowing oppression once and for all. It's the fuel that drives resistance. It's necessary. We need
Mhm.
it. And we can acknowledge that things are terrible or like something really unjust has happened. And we can also laugh, like maybe not add it, like that those maybe aren't directly connected, but like we can do both of those things because otherwise we'll burn out and we'll never be able to sustain the level of resistance that we need to in order to actually make stuff happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to your point, romance is not inherently revolutionary. There are plenty
No.
of escapist, whitewash, as you say, in again, and Tessa, you'll all get to read, which is really lovely. Um, but we can write revolutionary and read revolutionary romance and can see, possibilities of better futures, through our lens on the past. And so thinking of your own characters and your own stories, what to you feels like that kind of alchemy of creating a revolutionary HEA?
Oh, sure. I think, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I'm too close to, you know how like musicians can't describe what genre they play because they're like, I
Yeah,
don't know, this is just too close to it. Sometimes I feel a little bit like that. But I think that the things that I'm really interested in writing about are like the people that are not usual,
Mhm.
not normal. I don't want to write about the general trend. And you see that a lot when you do historical research is like historians will be like, generally, this is what people did, and we can see the evidence from here, 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 and here, and we can make general statements about what life was like. I'm really interested in the weird, not quite like the case studies. I'm much more interested in that. And I want to be accurate in a way that uncovers the the radicals, the innovators, the people who pushed against the status quo. There's so many examples. Just because something happened in a particular way didn't mean that people were all on board for it and loved it,
yeah.
right? Um, I think a lot, I just think a lot about the election of 1900, like most people.
Most
I just think
people,
a lot
yeah.
about
The
it
romance area.
because William McKinley won the election of 1900, but William Jennings Bryan got super, super close to winning. And if he had won, we would not have colonized the Philippines. We would not have fought in the Spanish American War, and we would not have done any of those things because William Jennings Bryan was not into it at all. And we got super, super close to that alternate timeline, but it didn't happen. And at this point, it seems so inevitable that those things had to have happened, but they didn't. And I think about that contingency, that historical contingency all the time. People in the past had choices. Everything was a result of people's choices, a result of their understanding of what was real, not what was actually true, what they understood to be true, and that they acted on and made choices about. And those forces are always at odds, and people are always living in contentious, like uncertain times because they didn't know what the future would look like. We can look back at at that past and be like, oh, of course the Spanish American War happened because we know it happened, but they didn't know that was going to happen. And if they did, maybe some people would have got out and voted in 1900 and been like, no, don't do that. But they didn't.
But
The
they
idea of
didn't.
historical contingency is so salient. And it makes me think too, because I mean, we're all Luddites here. Like, I think about this in this like AI inevitability. Like, we hear inevitability all the time right now. That's like very much the like style of progress we're in, of like, it's inevitable. We were going to do this anyway. Like this is, and to your point, nothing is. You always have choices. And when you've drawn out with your characters these case studies, like, here's somebody who made a different decision in spite of all circumstance, and there were real people like her. Like,
Yes.
your characters are all drawing on very real people who
Yes.
have given us like historical models and what would have happened, and follow their decisions out and think about how what decisions we have in our own lives.
I was just
Yeah.
my husband and I were just talking about Thomas Paine, who was a founding father. And because I keep going to this place called the Theodore Paine Foundation. And my husband's like, I keep forgetting, what the first name is. I keep thinking it's Thomas Paine. Who is that? And he looks him up and he's like, oh, he's a founding father. And I'm like, oh, founding father. So he's probably, a piece of shit. And he's like, well, hang on, let me Google him. And it was like, well, he died alone, generally regarded as a drunk and a not a very liked man, or like, oh, okay. Did he own people? Looking into it, it's like, well, no, he was a staunch abolitionist. That's why nobody liked him. And he had a couple of like really great quotes. Like everybody was expected to take a particular like sort of like religious oath at the time. And he said that he attended the church of his mind, and he said that if there's going to be trouble, let it be in my time, that my children may know peace. He had an eye toward the future in a way that his contemporaries didn't. So, I mean, I'm sure I would love to. So it's like, okay, I'm not saying you need to write the story about Thomas Paine. You need to write the story about the outlier because he is still in the history books, right? I like that you're looking a little deeper and you're going, okay, well, like, so at the end of his life, who was like, who was around the periphery of that life that was like, you are an intolerable man. I can't live in the same house as you. Like, like because of the ways that you have deviated from what was expected and what the history books will generally say this period was like and what we all thought and believed. I'm really interested in what you're saying about these stories that are about the case studies. And I think that that's what draws a lot of historical romance readers to the subgenre. Like we can all like attend a lecture or get through, you know, 11th grade history, but to have a fascination with the minutia of daily life for people who are not necessarily historical figures, right? Um, that's where like the really good stuff is. And for us to be reading now, it can also be really soothing during a difficult time rather than like I remember like I always think about this like watching a movie that's getting really intense but you're on an airplane and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in the sky. I'll get really like freaked out. And I'll be like, I have to turn this off. I don't like that they're like on a carriage that's like bouncing through town and people are shooting at them and I'm in the sky. I don't like that. Um, but when you're reading a book and you're like, this is a really perilous time and things are very uncertain for the people in this book, but it's a romance. So I know that like the people I'm the most locked in on are going to get to the end of this story. It's a way of like sowing hope for your own life that I
Yeah.
think is very valuable. And I just really appreciate how you are delving into like particular niche areas where you can sort of mine for these fascinating characters that like I feel like all of that is just to say that it feels like that's part of what is making up the alchemy of why this story might be revolutionary, why this HEA might be revolutionary. It's like it really is
Yes.
about the regularness of the people and about history's tendency to leave them, us, these characters, our beloved favorite characters out of, the factual texts that make up what we all need to know about the Napoleonic Wars, the Civil War, like the 80s, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think did you guys, I don't know if anybody's seen this SNL sketch, but there was an SNL sketch in the last couple of years where I think it's Gene Smart. I don't know. I can't remember. It might have been, maybe not. I don't know. It's not Gene Smart. I don't know who it was, but it's just like an older actress, very dignified, very classy, and she rolls into the like textbook meeting, and she's a romance writer, and so she's writing a math textbook for kids, and it's hilarious. And I'm like, oh, yes,
I
it's me.
I have not seen this, and
I
this
think I
It's
did see this.
so funny.
sounds
She makes math sexy.
She makes math sexy.
Yep.
amazing.
Maybe we need a
That's
little
what
bit more of that.
that's what you're doing with history.
I hope so. Well, I mean, a lot of people in history had sex. I can confirm this.
Can
Um, can confirm people did have sex in the past. That's how we exist. But also, you really just nailed the thesis that I have on the head there with like because it's a romance, because it's genre romance, we know that this story is going to turn out okay. And people can find pockets of joy and revolutionary happy endings without having to change the entire world,
Yeah.
right? I feel like there's a lot of pressure on us, like, oh, well, all these injustices are happening all around the whole world. I can't be joyful. I can't, like I feel like I hear so many people who feel guilty about not reading the stories every day and activating this grief constantly. And then when they find joy, it feels foreboding, sort of like, oh, I don't deserve this because there are people who are suffering in this world. But I think we need to think about joy as fuel, right?
Mm.
It helps us drive resistance and it helps us continue the fight. And we don't need to like we're allowed to. What I want to say is like we're allowed to experience joy with while still demanding that things be better in our world. We can do both of those things. Because people in the past did. People in the past suffered enormously, um, all sorts of different types of injustice, and they also found joy and love and happiness. Um, I don't know where we are at time, but I have a really good second chance romance that is a great example of this.
Would love to hear it. We've got a few more minutes. We're right at the hour, but would love your
Okay.
recommendation.
Okay. It's actually not a recommendation, it's a real life true story. Um, from
Amazing.
a friend of mine who is a Ukrainian refugee. So she lived in the Ukraine in 2022 when the Russians started bombing the Ukraine. She was divorced, she had two kids, and she was volunteering and helping send supplies to the front. She, in her work, ended up in this a Zoom meeting kind of like this. It wasn't Zoom, it was some other app, but she was in a meeting like this with the captain of the battalion who was receiving the medical supplies her organization had provided. And it turned out it was her ex-boyfriend um, from like when she was in her young 20s, right? So she was like, "Oh, how weird, hi," and he's like, "Oh, oh, okay, you know." But they didn't. They took care of business. They didn't talk. Like she thought nothing of it. She ended up taking her family out of the Ukraine because it was not safe. She came to Minnesota to join her sister, and has been living here. And 9 months after that, she got a random call from him, and he was like, "I'm about to go onto a fire line, and I don't know if I'm going to make it back." And she was like, "Okay, oh my God." And he's like, "But if I do, I'm going to come find you." And she was like, "Okay, great." I think I would like that. I hope you, I really hope you fight hard and you're okay. Like oh. And then he did survive and he did come find her. And like he moved to Minnesota. He brought his kids from his previous marriage with him. He brought his ex-spouse. Like they're all here. The whole blended family is here now. And I'm like, you can't make this stuff up, right? People would be like, that's a bonkers romance. That's not realistic, but that's real life because you can have joy and injustice at the same time. Those things can be held together in tandem, and we can love and celebrate and, care for each other even when hard things are happening.
Also, the detail about the ex-spouse coming with is so romance novel coded
Yes.
to be like, wait, if this is gonna be an HEA, we can't have these kids living an ocean away from their mother and she's in the war zone and they don't know if she's okay.
Yep.
The reader is stressed about these things as we near the third act of our story.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
Because people are making choices and we can decide how we want to live, right? Like we don't have to, never talk to our ex-spouse again. We don't like a divorce doesn't need to be a sad ending.
Yeah.
I like that's the ending of my book. Like, sorry, spoiler alert, he gets a divorce.
Maybe she did.
Mr. Milner, he gets a divorce. I really wanted to make that the title ultimately because I was scared that people would be mad.
That's amazing. I too, and again, I just want to end on this note of like appreciation that you have chosen characters who can live those kinds of stories and those kinds of lives. I think about this a lot again in historical romance because you can spend a lot of time reading historical romance and never trip into a revolution. Like in any genre, that's the case. Like you can spend a lot of time in very straight, whitewashed, ballroom and
Wealthy.
yes, and contemporary has all the same pitfalls. Every single subgenre does. And that is just not the romance that you write. And I'm so appreciative that we have authors like you. And I think of Adriana Herrera and others who have done this. Like, we're going to make everyone's life around the MCs better because, she has said this, like this idea that the HEA has to lift up more than the main characters, that
Yeah.
this is not just about rich people finding love and happiness. This is about like community building and change.
Yes.
And you have
Yes.
done that so beautifully.
Thank you. Well, I'm really hopeful that the indie publishing world can continue to thrive because um I've never tried to be traditionally published. I don't care. I don't need anybody to give me permission to write these stories because they're for me. They're ultimately for me. And sharing them with others is a great I don't know, byproduct, I guess. Because I think I do so much work in the history world in my day job, and I need some place to process that, and to really think about what that means and connect with what it means to be human in different times and I think that we can find consistencies and help us understand like what does it mean to be human now when we can learn from people who have, faced similar struggles in the past.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. I'm taking that second chance romance to my grave. That is beautiful.
It's
So,
so good. I
thank
was
you.
sitting and squealing in my chair when she told me. I was like, oh my God, I love this.
Yeah, write that. Oh, but thank
I,
you.
I was like, you should write a memoir.
I know, yeah. So that 50, 70 years from now, the future Jane Hadley will read the memoir and be like so convicted. Like I have to,
Yes.
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell her to write her memoir. I'm definitely going to tell her.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us on a weeknight. We were so excited to be able to celebrate your release
Thank
day
you.
and just talk about your stories and your characters who we love so much. So,
Yes, thank you so much for hosting. It was so fun to see everybody. Hello, Julian. Hillary, Jody and Liz and Maggie. Am I, is it like a spoiler alert if you watch the recording later, you're like, who's there?
Gotcha.
Oh, well, now you have proof that you got your extra credit for sure.
yes.
Hmm. Hmm. All right.
Awesome.
Okay, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jane Hadley.
Thank you. It was so great. I appreciate it.